By Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
All right, everybody, good morning. Welcome in Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Happy Friday. Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett, and yes, Casey McAllister in the producer chair. Just based on pre-show conversations, Casey is fired up and ready to go for today. We learned a lot yesterday. We learned that you guys have no problem defending your team against the likes of even Tom Brenneman. It made me feel good because I thought y'all just beat up on me for having anti-Bengals takes. And I'm not saying he was anti-Bengal, but nobody's safe. You guys will fight to the death for your team, and I respect the hell out of that. I respect
equal opportunity here at Chatterbox.
Yeah.
That's right. Anyone can get it.
Anyone can get it.
But, and they got it. But, guys, good morning. Happy Friday.
What a beautiful morning it is. This is the day we all wait for. It's Friday.
I mean, what a beautiful morning. You're right. What was it, 8 degrees?
Yeah, it was like 4 degrees.
I was crying walking from my car to the door.
I left a little bit of water in my cup in my car, frozen, completely frozen. I had to throw the whole cup away just with frozen water in it. But, yeah, other than the temperature, I would say it's a beautiful day outside.
Casey, good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
You are Joe Burrow's bodyguard. You are I mean, you've protected him more than that offensive line throughout his career. I tell you what, you were peak Casey yesterday. You were peak Casey yesterday.
Yeah. I'm a Joe Burrow defender. What can I say? Through and through, I will defend my guy to the ends of the earth. And I just don't think he's wrong. I don't think he's in the wrong here going around and advocating to pay your stars. I didn't think that was such a controversial take, but we'll get into it more, I guess, later on. But
the Bengals have never had a Super Bowl roster.
Never been a perennial Super Bowl team, and I guess they have no idea how to build a Super Bowl roster.
Real quick, Casey. We had a member chat here. Shout out Ricky, 13 months. If the Bengals fail to win a Super Bowl with Joe Burrow, do you think they ever will?
Certainly an uphill climb. You have to get really bad in a year where you're lucky enough to get another Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I think the thing can be the way that it's a little tough to talk about this because the AFC's been dominated by two quarterbacks for so long that it's hard to imagine if they don't win with Joe Burrow, a guy who's been able to break through and get to a Super Bowl, that they could ever win one. But I won't say that they never will. I mean, there's a long time.
I would say that. If they don't win with Joe Burrow, I would say that there's a – I mean, what quarterback are you going to get that's better than Joe Burrow? I'd argue none.
Well, the circle of life, at some point you get new owners.
Well, if that's the case, then –
I'm just saying.
Well, that question – okay, but that question's based on this ownership group.
No.
Yes.
I'm a Bengals fan. I'm not a Brown family fan. He said, will the Bengals win a Super Bowl after Joe Burrow?
If they change ownership, then yes. Same with the Reds. Same deal with the Reds.
It's true.
And it's up to you guys. Should we just dive into this? Do you want to come back to it? How do we want to proceed? Because we're a few minutes in, and we seem pretty fired up about it. So it's up to you guys.
Let's talk about it.
Push the headline. Craig might be real mad if we push the headline.
Well,
back.
here's a little inside baseball for this headline. I've got none. So I've got like 5 headlines.
Even better.
I've got the Team USA hockey match as one of my premier headlines.
Four Nations was sick.
So that's what we've got on headlines today.
We'll touch on it later.
Well,
okay.
We'll touch
push it back later.
A filler segment, if you will. It's a Friday. Yeah. Who cares at this point, right? Let me say this about this Joe Burrow situation, about what Tom said yesterday. So it was Tom and Luke, it was not fair. I mean, it was like a handicap match. I mean, you guys were just ganging up on those two. Those two didn't stand a chance. I wanted to tag in, but I didn't really want to anger everybody all in one day. But no, so there's only one thing that Tom said that caught my attention, because we always know. We know why guys are doing certain things. We know why Joe Burrow is doing this media tour. We know, and we say the reason why. Well, Joe Burrow's doing this to put the pressure on the front office. And we say it, and that's the logic, and that's the reasoning. The only thing that Tom said yesterday that got my attention, that really got me to kind of hone in on the conversation, was he goes, pressure on what? This is a front office that has just been buried by fans for pretty much its entire existence, especially in recent decades. They've had not a quarterback the caliber of Joe Burrow, of course, but I mean, this is it's not that much different than what Carson Palmer was advocating for in the early 2000s, which ultimately led to his departure. They've had their starting Pro Bowl caliber quarterback, and Joe Burrow's better than Palmer, don't get me wrong, but they've had their starting great quarterback go at the front office and say, we need to do this to get better, and they ignored it. Fans have been on them forever. That pressure's never worked. National media has made fun of this organization forever. That pressure has never worked. So I understand what you guys are saying when you say, well, yeah, he's doing it to put pressure on the front office. But, we had Jay Morrison on, I think, right when the whole thing started with Jamar Chase last year, and we were like, man, who's going to blink first? And Jay Morrison, the quote that still sits to me to this day, Mike Brown doesn't blink. He will not blink. He will not back down. He will not fall for the public pressure. You guys were just talking about potential new ownership being the difference in the future of this organization. Unfortunately, that might be the case. The thing is, I will say this. If Joe Burrow, the pressure he's trying to put on the front office, if that doesn't work, if he can't get them to cave or change their ways, I'm not being negative or hating on your organization, but there's no chance in hell you will ever accomplish anything with that ownership group, because if Joe Burrow can't get them to change their ways, there's not a single human walking earth or unborn to be walking earth in the future that will get them to change their ways. So that's the only thing. When Tom said that, it got me thinking, I don't think pressure works. He has to try something. I just don't think pressure is going to work. I don't know. Again, to be fair, if we're having this conversation in August heading into the preseason, I think that's, means to be concerned. But for right now, let's see what the offseason brings. But I don't know. Pressure has never worked in the past. It didn't work last year. The pressure of Joe Burrow being upset that Jamar Chase didn't get a deal done. Joe Burrow wanted T. Higgins 2 years ago, and they were still almost willing to let him walk. So I don't know. I'm curious your guys' thoughts. We know the reason for Joe Burrow doing this, but it almost seems like a waste of time because there is no proof in the history of this organization that pressure is going to get this ownership to cave.
You're absolutely right. There is no proof, and there's really no reason for us to believe it will cause them to change. But it's something we haven't seen before. Even Carson Palmer, when he was asking for the contract and everything, that was what we were talking about yesterday. That was the more behind closed doors approach. Ask for what you need, and once they say no, once they tell you they're not going to go that route, you demand the trade, you threaten retirement. We all know how that story went. Joe Burrow is using something that when the Bengals have been under the magnifying glass, the very few times they have been labeled contenders, there hasn't been social media. There hasn't been these shows, at least not at this level. And Joe's getting out there and putting the light on the Bengals front office, saying what they're doing, showing what they need to do, letting his voice be heard. And I think it's the best chance we have. I don't know if it's going to work. I would, venture to say it probably won't. But I know for sure Joe Burrow sitting at home wouldn't work. So this at least gives us a chance to change how it is. And I wouldn't, ever say it's wrong of him to try to influence the front office to change, because he recognizes that the way they've operated in the past isn't good enough to win anything, and he's trying. So I give him props for that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to work right now. The only time they would have to be forced to listen to is let's say they pay no attention to Joe Burrow, what he's doing on this media tour. They pay no attention to what the national media thinks. When they're going to start paying attention is if they don't bring back T, they don't bring back Trey. Joe gets pissed off. Joe asks for a trade down the line, and then you have people stop showing up to games, and then the stadium becomes empty. Like that's when the ownership would have to listen. And unfortunately, I hope it doesn't get to that final step where people are boycotting going to Paycor Stadium. But maybe that's what it takes. Maybe that's what it takes. Just stop showing up completely. It certainly hasn't stopped the Reds, given the fact that nobody really shows up to those games, and they're still hanging around. So I would imagine that it would take a full-on boycott of the franchise to get the ownership group to fully listen. And that's I guess the benefit of owning the team. You don't have to listen to anybody as long as you're making your dollar. Who cares?
Casey, and jump in here because I know obviously you were in the middle of it. And by the way, dialed in yesterday, great segment. Tom weighed in on his take on this, and it was a rare one because, by the way, I know many people. I got a note last night saying, "Oh, I bet you can't wait for the show today because you're going to let them have it because I bet you agreed with Tom." First of all, no disrespect to anyone when you disagree with them, but no, I actually didn't agree with Tom. This is going to go back to our debate between me and Elliot about Joey Votto coming up in a bit. But I do want to send it to Casey. Yeah, I want to send it to Casey because obviously you were fighting hard for this yesterday, but when Tom said that to you, that's what got my attention about it. When he said pressure to do what? We know why they're doing it. I there's no proof that this organization is going to cave to that pressure. I'm just curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with that idea either. I mean, I think that there is a good chance that this does not sway the front office one way or the other. And I think that's a bad thing. I think that's a very negative thing. And I think fans will see it that way too. I think when you talk about the Carson Palmer era, a lot of people feel like he kind of gave up on the city way too soon. And the injury history, him kind of like starting to tail off in his production didn't help with that either. Joe Burrow is quite literally, if he wins a few more games, MVP of this league. I think that's a no doubt, no brainer for most people. That means that if they don't listen to him now, they'll never listen to anyone. And I think fans will be very upset with that. And I think fans will start to lose their trust in this organization more than they ever have. I think it'll be lower than it was with the Carson Palmer era. And I said in that segment, thank God they found A.D. Dalton and A.J. Green to kind of help them dig themselves out of that spiral. Because otherwise it was going to be really horrendous. So for me, I just feel like if they don't listen to him now, it is just going to be an absolute hellstorm for all these fans around the city. I mean, it'll shake my core, and I'm one of the biggest diehard Bengals fans out there. I don't know if I could ever trust the ownership again. And a lot of people in here will say, oh, you're just a young Bengals fan. I've already been through this and that. This is a little bit different than the Palmer era. This is a little bit different than the 80s. This is someone that is generational talent-wise, and you're going to just let him rot. You're going to let him just fester here without helping him at all, without trying to be a modern organization, doing everything that you can to help him possibly win this year, because this year is the most important year. I just count me out if that's the case.
Fair enough. Again, this is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Casey McAllister, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. We'll step away for a few moments. We'll pick up with this when we come back. Again, and in the chat, weigh in as well. Do you believe that this pressure that Joe Burrow is putting on through this media tour, do you think it'll work? Based on the segment yesterday with Tom, basically saying pressure for what? He doubts that pressure is going to amount to anything. Do you guys agree, disagree? Will this media tour that Joe Burrow has gone on, do you think this will be enough to finally pressure the front office into changing their ways? We'll continue on with this when we come back. Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. And we are back off the bench right here on Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, 1410 ESPN Radio in Dayton. Justin Kinner with you here, along with Casey McAllister, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett, off and rolling here on a Friday. Do you believe the pressure will be enough to sway the front office to change their ways? And I know we've kind of all weighed on this slightly. I know we're going to close out this conversation here, this segment, but just quickly around the room, do you think this will be is this enough? Like Joe Burrow, I mean, he's doing this because he feels like, and it sounds like we're repeating this segment a lot. There's just more layers that keep coming out. And I think it's cool. And until we know what the front office is going to do, unfortunately, this will be a repeated talking point for a lot of shows throughout Cincinnati and honestly throughout the NFL, because every time anytime Sports Center or ESPN or the Fox Sports talk shows, CBS Sports, whatever, this is one of the biggest storylines this offseason. So do you guys think this is going to be enough at the end of the day? Like, it may not lead to a whole full on change in one offseason, but do you think it's going to be enough to pressure them into getting these deals done at the end of the day? And the front office can come out and say, hey, we were going to do this anyway. Joe Burrow didn't need to go do this. I don't know. I don't know where this is going.
Unless their intent is to lose the franchise, they have to do it. So if they're content on not having a city that supports them, then feel free to not extend anybody, not bring anybody back. Feel free to go that route. I would venture to say that that's a route that probably shouldn't be taken if you're still like in favor with this city. The city still showed the team was terrible last year, defense at least, and every single game was still sold out. Nobody stopped going to games last year despite everything. I don't think that if you let this all go down the way I think it might go down, which is to not bring back anybody and we're just going to go different directions everywhere, I think if you go that route, then you're going to lose everything. And I don't think that that's a risk that anybody's willing to take for a couple dollars. You can make every single move and be fine. You can do all of it. You can do the Jamar deal. You can do the T deal. You can do the trade deal. Nothing changes. Except you have 3 bona fide superstars that are playing for the Cincinnati Bengals on top of having Joe Burrow. Like that's the part of it I just will never understand. If they go the other route, they're going to lose it all. And I don't think they're going to lose it all.
Yeah, I'm more confident with all of this than I ever have been, and them keeping everyone. So I think, I think it will work at least to a degree. Whether they get everything done, I don't know, but that could be the difference between T. Higgins wanting the 33 he gets on the open market versus the 30 the Bengals are willing to offer him. So we won't even know how close they got on some of these things if that is the case. I think where we will really find out is what they say afterwards and how the fallout is from the players. If T. Higgins ends up leaving and it's because the Bengals couldn't get up to the $35 million offer or whatever it is that he somehow gets somewhere else, I think there's a completely different tune from these guys because we've seen transparency from the players, which we've never gotten from the front office before. So I think if anything, we'll at least understand what happened this offseason if they don't keep these guys around. And if they do keep these guys around, I don't care what the front office says. It's because Joe Burrow went on this media tour. So that's really where I stand with all of it.
Yeah, if I can just jump in real quick.
Nah.
Yeah.
To be the devil's advocate and to kind of understand Tom's side a little bit, the Bengals not following through on all the demands will put them in a really bad spot regardless. Like, let's say they don't, extend T. Higgins, but they go ahead and they restructure the contract with Trey Hendrickson, give him the money that he's owed. They give Jamar Chase the money that he needs, and they go out and fix the offensive line, and they add a couple of defensive lineman pieces, and that puts them in a spot to where, like, even if they do make some right moves at least at the start of the season, we're still going to be kind of like really upset with the team, and I'm sure Burrow will be upset with the team, and it just is a spot that you don't want to put your franchise in. You don't want to put your guy who's going to lead you to a Super Bowl in a spot where he's going to be upset. And to me, it's not really even about should they do it. It's that they need to finally come to terms with being a modern franchise. If you want to win in this league, there's only a couple ways to do it. One is to have the GOAT at quarterback and to have a magical run with guys that you've drafted. They tried that route. They tried to draft guys, and they haven't been very successful at that. So the other option is to start pushing these contracts a lot like the Browns, a lot like the Eagles, a lot like the Saints, a lot like the Rams. You push this money further down the line so you have every possible window to compete now and for the next 3 years, and then you suffer the consequences later when you can't get it done. But it frustrates me that we're kind of just like wading the water, just kind of like.
Well, it seems like there's a lack of urgency. It seems like we're still waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. Yeah. They were the ones who reached out to Jamar Chase before last season. They did that. Jamar Chase had nothing to do with it. They said, "Hey, you want to make a deal?" And then they offered him a bad deal. So like that's this front office, and we're sitting here on February 14th still waiting for anything to land. We're waiting for the Jamar deal still. That, again, they started last offseason. We're waiting for the T extension. We're waiting for a Trey extension. All while our starter quarterback is going on every single podcast show, TV show in the world trying to say, hey, guys, please pay somebody. Do something. And the longer it goes on, the longer I think the longer this fan base thinks that they're not going to do it. So my question to them is if you know you have to do it, just get it done. And if Jacob's right, if T's asking for $40 million a year, then it's a different story. But I don't think that's the case.
I don't necessarily think that's what he's asking
no,
for.
I don't
just saying
think,
if he does weasel his way to the open market
correct.
somehow and gets offered that, and that's why he leaves, that's a different story. That's not the Bengals being cheap. That's a completely different
100%.
part of the context. But I do think the first step of all of this, we've circled the mid-March free agency deadline, but something everyone's going to freak out about, and there's no need to because we know what's happening. March 4th is the franchise tag deadline. T. Higgins will be franchise tagged. He 100% will be franchise tagged, and he will not play a game on it. There is no chance that he wants to or will, or should the Bengals have him play a game on it. That is not a smart way to organize contracts to tag him 2 years in a row when you could have just given him a 2-year extension last year. But they need to make sure he doesn't hit the open market. By tagging him, you eliminate that open market free agency. You can negotiate him on a long-term extension, or you can trade him and recoup some assets. That is the only option for the Bengals. They absolutely have to tag T. Higgins, and then you can figure out how the rest of this offseason goes. If T. Higgins hits open free agency, there is a 0% chance he's on the Bengals again next year.
We're spending a lot of time talking about all the players that the Bengals need to bring back. Coming up here in a little bit, we're going to talk about some of the players that the Bengals need to add. Because the one point that Tom was making yesterday, and I agreed with Jake when you were saying, so what Tom initially said is spending a lot of time bringing players back that you're not winning with right now.
Right.
And I think that I disagreed with him on that only because the reason that they had a chance to win games, and we forget, this team won 9 games. This team actually has not, back-to-back bad seasons, the back-to-back non-playoff seasons, but back-to-back 9-win above 500 seasons, technically, right? Like if we're, it's not a moral victory, but this team, it's not like they're winning 4 or 5 games a year. They're finishing above 500. They're still coming short, but they're still winning football games. You're failing to reach your goals with these players that you're trying to do everything in your power to keep. I understood what Tom was saying from that standpoint, but the bottom line is this idea that it has to be that or the other. It doesn't, and that I think that's your guys' point. That hey, keep Trey. Get T taken care of. Get the deal done with Jamar Chase or whatever. If Gesicki's now part of the conversation, then great. But again, that doesn't mean that that's okay. We did that, so now we can't add anybody else. Why can't you do both? That's the thing. We talked about all this salary cap space that this team has. It needs to be both, and it should be both. And I think that sometimes we bail out. The organization gets bailed out when we do this. Well, they did that, so that's all they're going to do this offseason. Even if they extend Trey, they extend T, they get the deal done with Jamar Chase. If they do all of that, a lot of you out there would say, well, that's a successful offseason. No, if they do all of that and don't go heavy in free agency, it's still a failure of an offseason because – so then Tom is right. Then you just did all of that work to bring back core players of teams that weren't winning and didn't address the actual needs. And I have to say this too. I know you're going with Al Golden as the defensive coordinator because that signals we're going to go young on defense and it's about development. Those are buzzwords and code words for we're not going to spend money on the defense. And that's where I would be concerned too, because they're going to sell you on this hope of development and drafting and developing players and all this stuff. Sometimes that they're selling you on hope more than a game plan, and I don't like that approach either. I think, it's an approach. I don't trust them that they're doing it with the right intent. It sounds good, draft and develop. I don't think they're doing it with the right intent, though. I feel like that's their smokescreen of, hey, we're not going to spend money on defense, but hey, we got Al Golden. We're going to draft and develop young guys. You just got to be patient. This offseason is going to be fascinating the rest of the way.
Do I want them to pay people on the defense? Absolutely. Is that how it works when you have the many people we want to be paid on offense? No. Joe Burrow said, and what we're going off of this whole offseason is the Eagles model. They paid both their wide receivers. They paid their running back. They paid their quarterback big money. They paid their tight end big money. They paid their offensive line big money. And then they've drafted their defense. They've drafted starters on defense and gotten that to work, and that's how you have to live if you want to pay big money to a bunch of guys on offense. And that's where the Bengals are. And they have to start hitting in the draft. That's part of what you're doing with this, and including Trey Hendrickson in there. Once you pay an edge rusher that $20+ million, $25 million, you have to draft around the rest of the defense. There's just a level of need there that you didn't have before. The Bengals, during Joe Burrow's rookie contract, poured a lot of money into filling the holes that they were unable to address or missed on in the draft, but you don't have that luxury anymore once you pay these guys big money. And if the Bengals can't figure out how to draft, they're going to be screwed whether they sign T. Higgins, Trey Hendrickson, and Jamar Chase or not. So I would prefer to keep the superstars and then try to draft well instead of letting them go and then trying to replace those few superstars you have been lucky enough to hit on with the draft that we don't know they'd be able to do.
You said superstars. I just wanted to point that out. But, yeah, I know. Let me. Here's the thing that Joe Burrows said. I think. Imagine if the Reds were saying, we need to do what the Dodgers do. This is a little drastic of a crossover here, but if the Reds said we need to do what the Dodgers do, I don't think that's realistic. And where I disagree with Joe Burrow, I think using the Eagles is a bad example because the Eagles operate differently than I'd say 80%, 85% of the league. So for the Reds, we would say, well, I think you want to aspire to be what the Rays are, right? Like, I think that's more of a realistic organization that the Reds can actually, they can operate more like the Rays. The Reds will never operate like the Dodgers or the Yankees, right? I think we can all agree on that. So we'll look at the Rays and say, if the Reds can operate like that, the Eagles operate completely different because of the wealth of the owner, and it's different. I know everyone says billionaire owner, Mike Brown's a billionaire, but it is different for the cash-rich owner, and that is the Eagles. I don't like the Eagles comparison for the Bengals. I'm curious your take on that. And if there was a team, if there's an organization in football that the Bengals need to modernize their approach around like we do with the Reds to the Rays, who is that team? And it sounds, did you disagree with that, or where are you at with that? Like, I don't like the Eagles comparison.
Well, I think that in the NFL, you're all playing under the salary cap. Like, you know what you have to work with. You know you can be the Eagles. You absolutely can be. In baseball, you cannot be the Yankees if you're the Cincinnati Reds. You cannot be the Dodgers if you're the Cincinnati Reds. It's physically impossible to do that. You could absolutely do what the Eagles are doing. There's a way to structure these contracts that don't destroy the franchise. There's a way to do all of it under the salary cap, which everybody's playing by the same rules. Everybody knows the same limits, and I think that the Bengals absolutely could be like the best franchise in football, right? You can make your organization like the Chiefs. You can make your organization like the Patriots. You can do it that way because by the rules, by everything that's instilled in the NFL, you have that ability. That's the best part, the parity. There's so much levelness, if that's a word, in this league. You can absolutely be the Eagles if you're Mike Brown of the Bengals. They just don't want to be.
And Jake, I'll let you take it.
No, yeah, Elliot stole what I was going to say. I think the salary cap kind of voids all of that. I think everyone has the ability to play under the same umbrella. So the Bengals just, if they want to, they could. Now, does Mike Brown have as much cash on hand? No. As Jeffrey Lurie? No. But can he get it? For sure. There's ways for these billionaire owners to get the money that they need to get. He sold naming rights to the stadium in order to get the money for Joe Burrow. There's ways to find the money to get all that stuff done. And if you work under the salary cap, then I'm not going to give the guy an excuse for not having the cash if it worked under the financial constraints the NFL gives you, because I refuse to believe there's not a way that a guy worth $4 billion, $3.9 billion, depending on where you look, can't find that cash.
So the only slight pushback there, and I agree, but you could also say with baseball, everyone operates with the same rules of there is no salary cap. So the Reds could just, spend more money. You could say, well, they don't have the same amount of money as them. It's the same thing with the Brown family. They, from the standpoint of the Bengals have to do all of these things to be able to get enough money to put in escrow for the fully guaranteed contracts. Those other teams, technically, they don't have to do. They already have the money. They already have that money. They don't have to do things. You know what I mean? Like, they don't have to do things to get that money. The Bengals have to do things to get that money. The Dodgers don't have to do things to get these contracts done. They already have that money. The Reds have to do things to get the money that the Dodgers have.
But that's part of the thing that puts the Bengals in a bad spot on those contracts is that they're not willing to put the guarantees beyond year 1 and year 2. So they have to put more money up there. If they were able to space out guarantees, we looked at the graphic on here a couple of days ago after the Eagles won the Super Bowl, what the cap hits were for similar contracts between the two teams, and the Eagles were drastically less. So it all comes down to creativity of contracts, and granted, restructures and stuff along those lines goes back to what you're saying. You need cash in order to be able to do that. But if we went back 3 years, I'm not even saying go back a decade. If we went back 2-3 years and they operated like a modern franchise, they'd be in a much easier boat this offseason cash-wise. So if you start to change this offseason, is it difficult? Sure. This will probably be the hardest offseason financially that this front office and ownership will ever have to go through. But if you start the changes now, it makes those changes easier as we get down the road. And then eventually, when we're sitting here in 2030 and Joe Burrow's contract is up and we're talking about extensions for him and whoever that new core is at that point, we don't have to worry about all this stuff of extending 3 stars in the same offseason because they've modernized, they've moved the contracts around, they've done it earlier, and then you don't have this problem of having to guarantee, $220 million in one offseason, which is very, very hard to do. But you have to start somewhere, and they've backed themselves into such a corner this offseason with these stars and not drafting well to have replacements on the roster that I don't think they have a choice.
Justin, and just again, this is not. I'm not just trying to pick a fight here, but the Eagles owner, Jeffrey Lurie, $5 billion he's worth. Mike Brown, $4 billion. Bob Castellini, $400 million. The Dodgers payroll for just this season, $320 million. Like that's the game we're playing. Our owner and the Eagles owner is off by $1 billion, and I'm not saying the billion's not a lot of money. But the payroll for the Dodgers is worth more than our owner for just this season. Like that's the type of game we're playing here. Like if the Brown family wants to have money, they can have money. They can spend money. They can reallocate funds. I don't care what they do. They have $1 billion less than the Eagles guy. I like that to me is like that's not Bob Castellini playing with the Dodgers. That's a completely different sport.
The other thing the Eagles owner did that the Browns were the only owner to vote against and still haven't said anything about going that direction is as soon as they were allowed to sell percentages of their ownership to venture capital groups to have more cash on hand, Jeffrey Lurie was the first owner to do so. The Eagles were the first team to do so that they had, as Kinner's saying, more cash readily available to put in escrow for these contracts when they have to get their guys done. Again, the Bengals just turning down opportunities to make these struggles easier. That's why I'm done giving them the out for not having money. There's ways to get more money, and they just say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to operate, with full control. We're not going to give anything up, and we're not going to give this team the best chance to win. So this offseason is the end of me giving the Bengals outs because I think the NFL has given them plenty of routes to even the playing field in that respect, and they just keep saying we're not going to do it. So if you think you can do it on your own, great, then do it on your own. If you don't think you can do it on your own, take the help the NFL is giving you that plenty of other teams have taken.
All right, Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. Joe Burrow versus Joey Votto. I want to make that crossover comparison just briefly. And Elliot, we are not arguing today. I promise. I'm in a great mood today, so we're not arguing. It's just I'm curious your thoughts on the difference in approach because what Joe Burrow is doing is what I wanted Joey Votto to do, and I was the devil for saying that. So I'm just curious what the difference is. So we'll get to that when we come back. More Off the Bench next. The devil. One of the first bad takes I ever had in front of our guy Elliot over here, our relationship got off to a little bit of a bumpy start because, I had the Joey Votto take early on. Look, I get baseball's completely different. This doesn't happen in baseball. And I don't like that we just say, well, that doesn't happen in baseball, so we just, write it off. I think all professional sports, if you are the face of a franchise, every face of a franchise should be doing what Joey Votto's doing. I remember a couple weeks ago when the stuff started coming out about Myles Garrett right off the
Joe
bat.
Burrows
Everyone's
doing?
like, "Oh, what'd I say? Sorry."
Votto.
Oh, sorry. I think everyone should be doing. Yeah. Everyone should be doing what Joe Burrow's doing.
Reset it so we can get a good clip.
Yeah, reset it for the clip.
Oh, okay. I think that whatever. I think that every face of a franchise should be doing what damn it! What is wrong?
One more time.
Come on, man.
One more time. You gotta lock
Be
it in.
a pro.
You gotta
Be a pro one time.
You gotta lock it in.
This thing, it's a Friday, whatever. No, I think every face of a franchise should be doing what Joey Burrow. Jesus Christ, I'm done. This is just horrible.
Every face of the franchise should be doing what Joe Burrow is doing.
I got it. 3, 2, 1. I think every face of a franchise should be doing what Joe Burrow is doing for the Cincinnati Bengals. There. With that being said, a couple weeks ago, Myles Garrett came out and demanded, it was before the trade request, had come out and said that he was going to reevaluate his future with the Browns because he wanted to speak with the front office and find out what their plans were in regards to how they were going to put the organization in a position to win. What was their plan to put a competitor on the field moving forward? And everyone said, oh, here we go. Myles Garrett's going to strong-arm the Browns and push his way out. And I said, and what's wrong with that? Because the Browns have been operating without any pressure outside of just being made fun of for their entire existence, without any pressure from within. Every time Myles Garrett comes out and says he loves it in Cleveland, every time David Njoku comes out and says he loves it in Cleveland, everyone comes out and says they love it in Cleveland, although we're looking at it saying, what the hell's so great about Cleveland? You guys can't win a damn thing. I think that bails out the franchise. They feel like, okay, good. No one is strong-arming us. Like we made the mistake with Garrett, or with obviously Watson, but fine. I love what Myles Garrett did with Cleveland. I don't like that he might potentially not be on the Browns next year, but I don't blame him one bit. I think that actually everyone's saying, how's that leadership when you're quitting and leaving your team? He's not quitting and leaving the team. They quit on him. They quit trying to find ways to maximizing his talent. I don't blame him one bit. Joe Burrow, if it ultimately leads to him wanting out of Cincinnati, I completely would understand as if things don't get better moving forward. And I think a lot of Bengals fans would truly understand too, if the Bengals don't change their ways in the coming years and he demands a trade or doesn't want to, extend with the Bengals for a second contract. I think a lot of people, you may not like it, but I think deep down you're going to understand. Going back to when I started this show with you guys, one of the big back and forth between me and Elliot was about my take on Joey Votto. Joey Votto constantly frustrated me because the Reds had 3 rebuilds during his time in Cincinnati. 3 rebuilds. 3 times they hit the reset button. And every time, Joey Votto, love it in Cincinnati. I love being here. I want to win here. I want to be a part of something great here. And although I don't need him to say that to know that that's the case. Of course he wants to be a part of something great. I don't think that T. Higgins might leave the Bengals. I don't think it's because he doesn't want to be a part of something special here, that he can't be something special here. I think Votto owed it to the Reds during that stretch to put pressure on the front office the way that Joe Burrow is doing in Cincinnati. At no point did I feel like there was an urgency on Joey Votto to win baseball games, to win, to get to the playoffs. Like every time they would rebuild, you had your owner call out the fan base and say, where are you going to go? And it was just ugly and everything. He never spoke out and defended the team. I said my problem was that Nick Castellanos defended the Reds fan base more than the face of the franchise, Joey Votto, at the time. So I'm not interested in like a debate. Obviously, I want you to take Elliot, but I'm just saying like I'm not trying to get in an argument today by any means. But I think this is a prime example of what I was asking for to Joey Votto. And I know people say in baseball that doesn't happen. I'm here to say it should. I think, especially with the money that's being thrown out to baseball players, I think Shohei Ohtani has a responsibility to hold the Dodgers' feet to the fire if they ever decided to stop spending money. I think that any face of a franchise in any sport, it has a responsibility to the organization and the fans and themselves to make sure that they use their weight to influence the front office in some capacity. And I don't think Joey Votto did that once in Cincinnati, and I didn't like that. That's not what I liked. I like what Myles Garrett's doing in Cleveland, even though it's going to lead to him leaving, and I love what Joe Burrow's doing with the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't compliment them much, but I love what what Joe Burrow is doing in this particular situation.
Yeah, again, I don't know what Joey Votto is supposed to do. Hey, Bob, pay more money, please, than you have. You don't have money. He doesn't have money. Like that's not the comparison here. I mean, we're talking about 2 completely different worlds. A guy that has $4 billion and a guy that has $400 million. It's not even in the same stratosphere. And not to mention, what's Joey Votto supposed to do? They just paid him. They just paid him a whole lot of money. So now he's going to go back and double down and say, not only do I want you to pay me, I want you to go pay everybody else. We're all having fun down here in Cincinnati. I think that's absurd. I don't think any player's ever done that in Major League Baseball. I could be wrong. I would like to go find one example of it. but it's like it's not remotely the same thing. I think if Joey Votto would have done that, I think this entire city would have probably destroyed him, and you would have seen complaints left and right, just like they complained about him anyway, for keeping his mouth shut. And that's what he did for the majority of his career. He kept his mouth shut. He kept to himself. He kept quiet. And despite all of it, the Reds were still, I mean, they had 3 competitive seasons in his career, 4 competitive seasons in his career. So I'm not going to sit here and blame Joey Votto for that. I think you're right. I think if your owner has that ability, like in the NFL where most owners are billionaires, then absolutely you should be doing this. I just think comparing baseball to football with this money stuff is utter nonsense because it's not even the same world. The Dodgers owner has $12 billion. Our owner has $400 million. Like it's the level we're playing with isn't fair.
Then why, as a competitor, then, if you're Joey Votto or any Ellie De La Cruz, let's say the Reds somehow find a way to pay Ellie De La Cruz. If I'm Ellie De La Cruz, I'm almost questioning why do you want to stay in Cincinnati? Because once they pay you, they're not paying anybody else. You're not going to win here. That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm like baseball. That's why I really hope. I hope it's not like smokescreen stuff that they're doing with this talk about the salary cap, because I don't want to have a debate about salary cap. But like I'm praying to God that that's an actual thing coming up, because to me, it's like I get your point. Once he got paid, realistically, what did you expect him to do? Well, at that point, that's where I'm questioning the competitiveness of baseball players, because if you're willing to take every dollar coming to you, knowing that your team can't pay anyone else to come help you win baseball games, I am going to question your competitiveness, because Joe Burrow got every dime coming to him, knowing that he plays for a franchise that's been relatively cheap throughout its existence. And Joe Burrow's not sitting here saying, well, I got mine, and I hope they could pay T. I hope they could pay Jamar. He's demanding that they do it. And I would have appreciated more Votto speaking up the way Burrow is for the Bengals. I get your point. I don't think Joey Votto could have pressured them to spend like the Dodgers. But one time you couldn't have asked for a little help. One time you couldn't have shown frustration. One time I just, as a fan, I didn't appreciate that from that standpoint.
I think that, sure, you might be not completely wrong, but Joey Votto's deal was 10 years, $225 million. That's over half of what our owner is worth. I think Joey Votto going back in to ask him for, hey, let's get as many superstars as we can, and we'll just try to bankrupt us. Like that's not the attitude. And I do think if Joey Votto went on media tours, and if he went on different shows, and if he was begging, I think every fan would have destroyed him here. I think people would have just made fun of him, and I don't think that's the method. I get your point. I get your point 100%. I just don't even think it's remotely possible in the sport of baseball to do what Joe Burrow is doing. At least not on the Cincinnati Reds. Maybe other franchises, the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Mets, they can all do that now. The Reds cannot do that. I understand your point. I understand the frustration with having a player seemingly not be frustrated, but Joey Votto was frustrated. Joey Votto's not happy that he was on a team that lost pretty much every single year he was here. Joey Votto's not happy about that. But what is Joey Votto going to do? Joey Votto doesn't have power. The Major League Baseball owners are the most stubborn owners of all time. Like there was no changing their minds and whatever they were going to do. And not to mention, you have to show a little bit of loyalty when they just paid you. They gave you the commitment. They did pay money. They did spend money on you. So it's like you can't really do that in my opinion. But I understand what you're saying.
But he was going to get that money no matter what. So this is why. And here's another hot take of mine. And
he probably would have
add it to the list, I guess. Yeah, he probably would have got more if he left Cincinnati. But, I mean, the thing is, here's my hot take about Major League Baseball players across the board. Of all the professional sports out there, of all the professional athletes out there, those are the least competitive athletes in the history of sports, if that's the case. Because if like Joe Burrow has his money, he's not content with being paid. He wants to win. Because Joe Burrow can get that money anywhere. If Joe Burrow demanded a trade today, there will teams be lining up saying, Joe Burrow, what do you want pay-wise? We'll take care of it. Joe Burrow can have his money and win. Joey Votto can have money and won. And he was content. He was content with 3 rebuilds during his time in Cincinnati, which is just wild. And at no point we tried to win. And people say, well, he has a no-trade clause. That's right. That means he does have power in that regard. Like, he does have power. The no-trade clause means he can go to them and say, hey, these are the teams you can trade me to. Get me out of here. I don't want to be here if we're not going to win baseball. So I think Major League Baseball players are the least competitive athletes in all professional.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know about all that. I think that, like, players want to play. Like, they want to compete. They want to try their best. It's baseball's fault. It's the whole sport's fault that there's guys like Anthony Rendon out there that sign these 10-year deals and objectively
that's horrible.
objectively quit after it. Like, he quit. He quit. Like, he didn't want to play baseball anymore. He quit. He signed a $100 billion deal, and then he laid down on his bed, and he's like, you know what? I'm good. Like, that's not his fault. I would blame the sport on that. Like, I'd blame a little bit on him as well. But I blame the sport of baseball for having these ludicrous contracts. Juan Soto, I love Juan Soto. Juan Soto's not worth that. No player's worth that, I'd argue. Shohei Ohtani.
You're worth that if you pitch and hit.
Correct. Maybe if Shohei Ohtani.
For the duration of the contract.
Correct. You have to be healthy.
Right, that's what I mean. Like, even in Shohei's case, who knows if that's worth it, coming off of the injury he had.
Like, I don't know. I think that lumping all these players and that they're not competitive and they don't want to win because they've earned their money because of how good they were trying to win, I think that's a silly argument.
Respectful, again, what did Joey Votto do that made you feel like he wanted to win baseball games?
He was a Hall of Fame baseball player. I don't know. He was a Hall of Famer. Out of every player that's ever come through Cincinnati, I'd argue Joey Votto is going to rank near the top. Probably top 3 if you want to get into real specifics. I'd argue maybe number 1, but if you want to say number 3, top 3, you can say that. But I don't understand how you say the guy doesn't want to win when he's like a Hall of Famer. He had a Hall of Fame career. Every single year he was out there, he was the best player out there.
There's a lot of players that can go out and have Hall of Fame careers and not have the drive to be a part of something special and want to win. I think
that's crazy.
Look at Mike Trout. Do you believe that Mike Trout is truly all about winning?
Yeah, I don't think
I do. Yeah,
I don't think it's there. Like, what? But you can't take away from them. Like, they've played the best as they could play. They're playing the best baseball they could possibly play.
But like, no, and I'm with you there. But like, if you are Mike Trout, you're like, the fact that baseball, I think he's been in the playoffs twice. I think in over a decade he's been in the playoffs twice, maybe once. I think baseball's just seen him in the playoffs once, which is just wild. But like, Mike Trout, at a certain point, you're like, man, I've been great for this long. I deserve to play for a contender. I don't think anyone would blame him for wanting to get the hell out of the Angels. Joey Votto, hey, I've been to Hall of
Fame and signed Pujols. I mean, I feel like if you want him to go sign big free agents, I feel like Mike Trout did a pretty good job.
Well, no, at a certain point, well, you could say Cleveland.
Sucked.
Look at all, but like then does that mean the Browns? We don't need to get in that debate. Never mind. I don't want to go there. But no, at the end of the day, like I think that baseball players are the least competitive, NBA players second least competitive, and then football the most competitive of all the professional sports out there. Hockey, I don't follow hockey enough to weigh in on that.
I have a wild take. I think professional athletes are all pretty competitive.
I think they're competitive, man. I don't like your Votto thing. I understand your sentiment. But where you lose me is, like, you say that what did he do to win? He played the best a human being could possibly play.
No.
That's what he did.
I asked, what has he done to make you believe that he prioritized winning? Because I would say nothing.
Let me ask you, how is being a Hall of Famer not prioritizing winning? Like, if you didn't care, you would be Anthony Rendon and you'd just be slapping fans and you'd be not playing baseball. That's not competitive. That's your argument. If you're making the whole argument on Anthony Rendon, I'd get it. But you're making an argument about a guy who gave everything for the city and, not to mention, was pretty damn good for the entirety of his career. Like, that's where I get lost in the sauce.
I don't think he did everything for the city. If he did, he would defend the fans to the front office. He would be repeating what we've said. Or what I've said. I don't know. But we'll step away so that we don't get, we're good. We're all friends. Last thing on this, we're going to step away for a few minutes. Jacob and Casey will jump in here. We're going to go back to the Bengals. We keep talking so much about all these players that the Bengals need to keep. But what about the players that they need to add? Who do they need to add to make this team more competitive, to take this team to that next level? Yes, we could talk about the draft, and that's not what we're doing here, but a chance for the front office to go spend and add key pieces to this roster in 2025. What are some of the key pieces in free agency that we should be keeping an eye on here early? We're less than a month away from when, we could start really focusing on that, but Jacob and Casey will give you a couple players to keep an eye on in free agency that the Bengals need to add and not just keep. We'll get to more of that when we come back. We welcome you back off the bench. For those listening in Dayton on the radio, this is hour number 2. Happy Friday. Justin Kenner, Casey McAllister, Elliot Ruring, Jacob Tissett with you here. The Bengals keep talking about they need to keep T. They need to keep Trey Hendrickson, Mike Gesicki. Obviously, the list goes on and on. They have to keep their players, right? But for them to be good next year, yes, they need to keep the players that put them in a position to win last year, but they need to add so that they don't miss the playoffs for the third straight season. So rather than focus on the players that they need to keep, I think for them to go to that next level, they're going to have to make a lot of key new additions as well. Free agency coming up. Obviously, we're going to talk about the draft as that gets closer, but in regards to free agency, have you guys taken I know you have because you're about to take over from here, but like the names, you've taken a dive into this. What are some key names that make sense for the Bengals that obviously are A, going to make them better, but B, realistic options, not just going for the top free agents just to go for the top free agents? What are some of those realistic names that you think that the Bengals are realistically going to target this offseason?
That's obviously the easiest thing to do when talking about the Bengals. We know there's a lot of holes on the defense. We know there's some holes on the offensive line. You'd like to add to a lot of places. You pull up the list of free agents. You say, oh, there's big names at the top. They'd be great to add to Cincinnati. Yeah. We know that's not how the organization operates. So Casey and I have taken a look at some of the pending free agents and gone a little bit down the list. Not as far down as some other people have gone for Bengals additions because there is more money on the table than a lot of people would like to admit. But there's some big names out there that would be pretty exciting to bring in. I mean, you got to think about where the Bengals have found success in free agency in this era. Trey Hendrickson, Mike Hilton, these guys are towards the top of Bengals players of the era, and they came in as mid-level, low-level free agents. So we've found success there, and I think the Bengals can do it again. The first name that really jumps off to me, and it's a position I wish we didn't have to attack in free agency this year because I wish Sheldon Rankins would have worked out, but there's no way around it. The Bengals have to address interior defensive line in free agency or in the draft, and with Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson in the draft last year, I would like them to get a more veteran route, and the name I have circled is Osa Odighizuwa from the Cowboys. Number one, a very fun name to say, so would love to have Osa Odighizuwa on the Bengals, but he has a 78.5 pass rush grade via PFF, which is 11th out of the 220 D tackles this year. That would be just about where B.J. Hill is, but he's 3 years younger than B.J. Hill. So a lot of projection there. You could see him as a really, really good player for a long time in the middle of this defense. 7th in D-line sacks, or 7 D-line sacks, ranking him 12th, which would be second on the Bengals, which is obviously something they really need to add next to Trey Hendrickson. We've talked about adding a new edge potentially through the draft. I think somewhere where you could really make some strides this offseason is improving that interior with Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson. I think Osa Odighizuwa would be a really good value signing that the Bengals could bring in. He had a great year this year. Definitely got up there in terms of money versus where he was expected preseason, but second in total snaps for D linemen is another big thing. He's out there. He's available. That's huge with this Bengals defense as we're talking about trying to fix it. And then to the other side of the ball, the other guy I really like for the Bengals is a guy that we've talked about for about 3 off seasons in a row now. Dalton Risner, guard for the Vikings. He played in Denver for a while before moving to Minnesota, and he's a really, really good guard. 0 penalties, 0 sacks allowed in both of the last 2 years. He's clean, he's buttoned up, and I would love to do what we did with Trent Brown and Amarius Mims to fix the guard position with Cordell Volson and Alex Kappa more than likely moving on. I would love to sign a veteran guard, a Dalton Risner, if the Bengals really want to get fun, go get a Zach Martin from the Cowboys, but then draft a guard high and don't have the expectation of starting him in week 1. If he proves he can, absolutely, that's great, but you have a 1 or 2 year stopgap before that young guard is forced in there, and I think the Bengals could really succeed in overhauling this offensive line going in that mode instead of just relying on the draft to fix those guards.
Yeah, and for my list, I've got a couple of names here that people may or may not remember. I'm going to start with the guy that we should have had in the 21 draft, the guy that should have replaced Jackson Carman. For those of you that don't remember, we were sitting at 38. We traded out of that spot with New England. They picked Christian Barmore. Many of us thought that we were going to pick this name, Tevin Jenkins. He's been a guard. Well, actually, he's played everywhere. He's played left tackle. He's played right tackle. He's played left guard for the Bears. And everywhere he's played at, he's been very, very efficient for the team. His biggest knock is injuries, and that is a little scary. But the level of production that you get out of this guy is just phenomenal. I mean, last season he only had 17 pressures, which is phenomenal. It's a guy that would get you really beefed up there too. He's 6'6", 321. You're asking about his RAS score? I love it. Yeah, so that's one of the guys that I think would correct one of the mistakes that they made in the 2021 draft, Tevin Jenkins. I think that solidifies your left guard spot for years to come. And another guy that I have my eye on in the same draft, Levi Unzurike.
We're going all fun names around here.
Yeah. He's a defensive tackle out of for the Detroit Lions. Last year, he had about 47 pressures and 3 sacks, which is really good for a defensive tackle. He doesn't usually finish, but he's getting that pressure, which is really important. The Bengals are lacking that sort of penetrating 3-tech, and he would be a guy that would come in and raise the floor of the defensive tackle room, a guy that you're not having to spend a ton of money on. And someone that is in that range of the age range and the size that they look at, that the Bengals could really be targeting. And I'm sure Jacob and I, we've had other guys that have come to mind, but these are some of the top guys on our list where we would be like,
yeah,
they're onto something here. These are some guys that are really excited about. And we hope that you get excited with us with these guys, because they would be huge additions to the Bengals.
Obviously, talking about moving on from Alex Kappa, maybe even Cordell Volson, a guy that's very interesting outside of Tevin Jenkins or Dalton Risner for guard is Pat McCary. He's been that 6th lineman in Baltimore for many years. He's played all 5 positions, center included. He's been there since 2019, 6 seasons in the AFC North. That's some invaluable experience in some unique football. I think he would be an interesting player to bring in as well, maybe a little cheaper since he's never been that every down starter, but I think he's another name to watch. I think guard's going to be at the top of the list for the Bengals in free agency. You don't want to tie yourself up being forced to take one first round. There's only one first round guard on most boards. You get into a few more in the second round, but once you get down into the middle rounds, team needs come into play, and they can swoop in and take guys that you think will be there, and they just end up not being on the board. So the Bengals can't go into the draft without Alex Kappa, without Cordell Volson, and not having starting guards on their roster. I love Cody Ford. I hope the Bengals bring him back. He should not be starting at guard next year. He's a great depth piece, should not be starting at guard. That's why I think that's probably the number one need going into free agency.
There's one other name that I'll drop here on the defensive side that I think could be a Chidobe Awuzie level signing. Paulson Adebo.
Yeah.
He's from New Orleans. He had an injury last season that took him out for half the year, but that's very similar to what happened with Chidobe, and the production is there. It's a very similar profile, 6'1", 195. A guy that was starting to really come into his own into the league, and a team that was struggling on defense. He was one of the lone shining pieces on that defensive secondary room. So that's a guy that I'd be also really excited for. He's 25, fits the profile that the Bengals are looking for, and he's not going to break the bank. He's probably looking at like 13, 15 million a year. That's another guy that I'd be super, super excited for the Bengals to pick up.
I'm a little bit higher on our DB room going into next year than I think a lot of other people are. I think DJ Turner, Dax Hill, Cam Taylor-Britt gives you a decent floor. We saw DJ and Dax especially play very well before their injuries, really coming into their own, their first time getting significant snaps at corner. I think that's all right. But with those 3 as your starting 3 corners, 2 of the 3 of those are free agents after next season. So you either have to draft a corner to have some sort of continuity this season and next if you don't plan on bringing those guys back, or, like Casey said, Paulson Adebo, somewhere along those lines, bringing a veteran in free agency to also, kind of bring that along. But you don't want to tie your hands up and say we have to extend these guys going into next year because they're the only corners we got. You got to have a little bit more depth in that room.
Yeah, one other guy really, really quickly, and I'm sure Kenner will love this one, something that I would love personally, bringing in Nick Chubb as your power back. Right now, his projected contract is $3 million.
I don't hate that at all.
It's $3 million for Nick Chubb and Chase Brown.
He's
Could
your
you
goal line
imagine that?
back with Chase Brown. We're not asking him to be a feature back.
I guess.
I would cheer for every. I would cheer for every Nick Chubb touchdown. Yes, every touchdown in Cincinnati he gets as a Bengal. I would cheer for those scores. That's it, as far as that goes. But look, I mean, I don't know what to make of what Nick Chubb could be moving forward. I think Cleveland's going to decide if they're going to, bring him back a little legacy return. You bring him back, but people, and I think this is slightly different, obviously, but people kind of counted out Christian McCaffrey, not in regards to talent, but like this guy, he's been banged up. I mean, we'll take a flyer on him and see what happens. It wasn't just a flyer. They gave up a lot to get him, don't get me wrong. But the guy also has continued to be injured moving forward. Look, running back moves the last couple of off seasons have been massive. It was really in the middle of the season, the trade, Christian McCaffrey to the Niners. The team went to a Super Bowl after that. Obviously, Saquon Barkley to the Eagles. Team goes and wins the Super Bowl this past year. I don't think Nick Chubb anymore is on the caliber of those guys, but I think he would help a team like the Cincinnati Bengals big time, especially because he would be such a different back than what you guys already have in that room. It would definitely add a bruiser into that mix as well. So let me ask you, what position do you think that they're prioritizing in the draft in regards to, hey, we're not even going to look at a free agent in this position. We're going to really just focus on this position in the draft? Or is it they're going to attack free agency and they'll take what's left in the draft? How do you think they're going to prioritize that?
I'm really hoping it's option 2. Good teams do option 2. You find out what's available in free agency, you fill as many holes as possible, and then you're not sitting there at 17 saying, we need an edge rusher, we're going to take edge 5. You take who the best player on the board is. Reed said it when he was hosting yesterday. You have to take the number 1 player. That's what we've seen work a lot now. We've seen the Eagles do it. We've seen the Lions do it. Instead of taking wide receiver 3 or 4, take guard 1. Instead of taking tackle 5, take tight end 1. Instead of taking, whatever marquee position it is that year, take the guy who's the best at what he does. And I think that's something I would really enjoy the Bengals to do this year, kind of change that model. There was a terrifying report last night that there's a potential that the Bengals have removed some edge rushers from their draft board because of size concerns. They don't meet their standard model for edge rusher size, and that would ruin my week. That would ruin my night. That would ruin my month. If the Bengals are operating with the size profile that had them whiff on so many edge rushers in the last few drafts, and they're not willing to get smaller guys like Nolan Smith, Bryce Huff, these guys we just saw win a Super Bowl as a hell of an edge rushing duo, I don't understand why they're so stuck in their ways. That would really scare me. But I hope that they operate freely in free agency, try to fill as much as possible, and give them as much flexibility as you can possibly have on draft night.
Do you guys see the graphic about how many scouts that the Bengals had and how many? So what's more sad, that the Bengals only have 4 scouts, or that the Browns have the most in the division? And it, like people say, I can't believe the Bengals only have 4 scouts. Well, the Browns have the most and the least to show for it. I don't know. I mean, is that ever going to change either? You talk about Casey earlier, this franchise needs to, start acting in a more modernized way. I mean, when is that going to change? There's just so many of those little things, but obviously the Browns having 20 plus scouts. What has that done? But we could literally say that only 4 scouts has hurt the Cincinnati Bengals in that regard. So I don't know. I thought that graphic was fascinating when that popped out.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that as more people find out about the Bengals' lack of scouts, they hire more scouts. I think public shame is the best chance we have to get them to change some things. And 4 scouts as an NFL franchise. Honestly, I was excited to see that graphic because I thought it was lower. I didn't realize they had 4 full-time scouts. So kudos to them for the organizational change already. Last I had heard, they were at, I think, 1 or 2 in the Super Bowl year. So baby steps.
So they've doubled.
Maybe by 2030,
they've doubled in size.
Maybe by 2030 we can get double digits.
Yeah, effort leading to failure. There's at least a little bit of an out you can take. No effort leading to failure. Nothing you can say about that.
Yeah.
So I would say the Bengals situation much worse.
That's the nicest thing effort with failure is understandable, or at least more forgivable. That was the nicest thing you've ever said about my team. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Failure is the key word, though. All right, let's move over to the Reds. We'll step away for a few moments. We'll talk about this. Jonathan India, no longer a Red, but he's being interviewed as if he's the captain of this team. He had some interesting things to say. He was the captain. He had some interesting things to say about the hiring of Terry Francona. Was it a dig at David Bell? We asked this question back when he was interviewed as a Red, when he was still with the Reds. Repeats it in a much different way this time. Was this a shot at David Bell? We'll discuss that. Plus, MLB put out their top 10. We talked about Elly De La Cruz coming in at number 31. We'll take a look as Major League Baseball released its top 10, or MLB Network did that. So we'll talk about that when we come back. And we are back off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. I was listening to a SportsCenter update the other day, and they were talking about Shohei Ohtani reporting to camp, and they said Shohei Ohtani is going to start, throwing at spring training after being minimized to a hitting role in 2024. I don't know why I thought that was just so uniquely worded. The poor Dodgers, they had to minimize Shohei Ohtani to just a mere hitting role. Yeah, he just had to provide them a hitting role last year. I mean, my God. I mean, that's I think we're about to see if he is able to stay healthy and pitch and produce the way he did offensively last year. I mean, it's back to, talking about him being the unicorn again, just because we just don't see things like that. We've seen it before with him, but to see it with the Dodgers now and and they won a World Series last year without getting that production. That's the other thing too. We talked about all their additions this offseason. They technically added a pitcher in Shohei Ohtani because they didn't get they didn't get to use him as a pitcher last year. They technically have now added Shohei Ohtani, the pitcher, with all their other moves. So, poor Dodgers. But
poor Dodgers.
Everyone, thoughts and prayers to the fan base as they navigate through the season.
Please.
But the top 100 has been released in increments of 10 over the last week or two. And we talked about, obviously Elly De La Cruz coming in at number 31. Take a look. Here is the list for the top 10 players in Major League Baseball, according to MLB Network. They put it out on their socials. There you go. So Gunnar Henderson coming in at 10, the Guardians with Jose Ramirez at 9, and top 3 players in Major League Baseball. Bobby Witt Jr. coming in at 3 for the Royals. Aaron Judge, the Yankees, at 2. And no surprise, Shohei Ohtani coming in at number 1. Juan Soto at 4. I mean, it's a who's who of stars in that list of 1 through 10 right there. Anything popping out to you? Any surprise in that top 10 ranking for the top players in baseball?
No, I think they nailed it. Maybe you could argue a couple pitchers in there. But no, I think that's pretty solid.
Yeah, I think we should just keep doing the top 99. Stop doing top 100.
That's right.
Just go 100 to 2 and keep Shohei at 1. I'll choose to be mad every year that they don't put Shohei 1 as long as he's pitching. I guess I would have been fine this year if they didn't, but I don't know how you couldn't with a 50-50 season. But as long as he's playing both ways, Shohei should just be locked into number 1.
Yep.
So let's say Shohei Ohtani doesn't exist. Are we Aaron Judge the best player in Major League Baseball, the number 1 player in Major League Baseball then?
I think it's a fun conversation. It's the same as the Lamar Jackson conversation. If you're the best regular season player of all time and you can't do anything in the playoffs, are you great?
He looks good at 2. Like when that list comes out, you're like, oh yeah, Aaron Judge is the number 2 player in baseball. But if Shohei doesn't exist, it would be weird saying Aaron Judge the number 1 player in baseball. I don't know why that's a thing and why that feels weird saying that, but that's just kind of where we're at. Jake, you brought this up during the break. Elly De La Cruz, we were kind of trying to debate, is 31 about right? Is that too low? Being ranked number 31 for Elly De La Cruz, actually pretty significant considering the climb.
Yeah, up 69 spots, as we mentioned yesterday, and
Nice.
now that the rankings are final, he was the biggest riser of any player in the MLB. 100 last year, barely sneaking into the rankings, all the way up to 31, up 69 spots. William Contreras, second, up 53 spots. Matt Chapman, third, up 51 spots. Ketel Marte, up 47 spots. And then Vladimir Guerrero, up 39 spots. So a significant jump for Elly, much more than any other player in baseball this year, and I think that means a lot. But going back to that top 10, Aaron Judge at 2, Juan Soto at 4, I personally think Aaron Judge should have been more competitive and forced the Yankees to re-sign Juan Soto.
Your thoughts, Justin?
A real lack of a competitor, if you ask me. I mean,
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know.
Multiple
But
MVPs.
to be fair, he was not speaking out on behalf of his teammate, Juan Soto. Joe
That's
Burrow,
true.
much better teammate and leader. Much better teammate and leader.
We're the only show in the world to say Joe Burrow's a better leader than Aaron Judge.
That's correct. Here we go. Super chat for Michael Rolfe, $9.99. Whoa, Zebra Elliott. Votto is at best 5th all-time for the Reds. He is behind Pete Rose, Johnny Bench, Joe Morgan, Ken Griffey Jr., and would you put Votto ahead of Barry Larkin, Tony Perez? Yes, I absolutely would. And not to mention, he had what was that? Ken Griffey Jr. at 4. Kenner, do you think Ken Griffey Jr. is going to be regarded as one of the best Reds of all time?
Ken Griffey Jr.'s Reds career is greatly skewed by the rest of his career.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Because it bled in. So obviously we know how dominant he was with the Mariners. It bled into the early goings of the Reds. Like, I think the Reds got 2 really good seasons out of Ken Griffey Jr., and then it was just a nostalgia run the rest of the way. I can't put Griffey ahead of really any of those major names that were listed out there. Love Ken Griffey. My God, he's one of my all-time favorite players. But as much as I've been kind of ragging on Votto a little bit ago, no, I would put Votto's career as a Red above Griffey's career as a Red as far as that goes.
I don't even think it would be remotely close. I don't think it's even in the same
Yeah.
universe. I love Griffey. I love Griffey Jr., but I mean that's just not it.
Like, I mean, obviously career-wise, Griffey over Votto, but Reds career-wise,
Correct.
no.
Just arguing
Votto
Reds.
over-
Just
yeah.
arguing.
Yeah.
Just arguing Reds. Just arguing Reds.
All right, Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. Jonathan India, remember him?
Yeah, I do.
I remember him greatly.
By the way, we don't dislike Jonathan India. I see some people kind of beating him up a little bit in the chat for taking a shot, not in the chat, I'm sorry, but on social media for taking a shot at David Bell. Do you believe his comments were taking a shot at David Bell, just continuing to the word accountability keeps getting brought up, right? Accountability was starting to be mentioned a lot towards the tail end of last year. Like, what is David Bell doing in the clubhouse as far as accountability when this team makes this many errors, when they make this many base running blunders? What kind of accountability is being utilized in that clubhouse? And the one thing that keeps being referenced with Terry Francona is obviously there's going to be a lot of people being held accountable throughout, but I thought Jonathan India being asked about what, his thoughts on the Reds being led by Terry Francona, it just seemed like more digs being taken at David Bell. Do you believe that's the case? Is he taking a shot at David Bell here?
I mean, it's a little bit. The quote, or I guess it's not really even a quote, it's India said in the final days of last season that some of the younger players took advantage of Bell's patience and nurturing personality as a player's manager. And basically he said, I think the quote is, Francona's going to light a fire under him. So, it's certainly a little bit of a shot. If anything, a ricochet shot. It
Can't not be. Yeah.
So it's like it is. I mean, if I was David Bell, I wouldn't like that quote. But I imagine there is some truth in it. I imagine like the nonchalant nature, demeanor of David Bell that we all saw at post-game press conferences actually was who David Bell was.
Maybe.
I think that's what I take away from this quote. And I think Jonathan's going to be right. I think that the Reds are going to look a little bit different under Terry Francona. Terry Francona is not going to let that slide. He's not going to just sit back and let the young guys take control of the locker room. And, again, that's me putting a little bit of words into Jonathan India. But I don't think that's too far off of what he said. I think young guys were taking advantage of David Bell towards the end of the year, and you saw it.
Yeah, I guess the biggest question is how many times is Jonathan India going to be asked about the Reds this year?
A lot.
When Nick Castellanos left to
lot.
Philly, it was the story of the offseason. Felt like every time he was given a hit, it was something about the Reds. And we were talking about that the whole time. Is Jonathan India asked about the Reds more if they're good or bad?
See, I think
because I think if they're good, they're asking him, pretty quickly about how the young guys he played with, how they turned it around. If Ellie's as good as we think he's going to be, there'll be some questions about that.
I think bad.
But if they're bad,
I think bad.
Right.
I think they still go to him if it's bad.
I think so too. I think they ask what went wrong, what changed.
Yeah.
yeah, because when
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was just gonna say when Castellanos left, it's because they were bad, and it was like, okay, they didn't want to bring you back. They could have definitely used your services. Obviously, I think the big argument about India is we appreciated India, but also knew there was a backlog of talent in the middle infield, and it just didn't make sense to extend him at that time, and he was the odd man out. I think it's slightly different because I think that the Reds were hoping and fingers crossed and are optimistic that this is going to be a much more competitive team this year. I don't think, and by the way, I think it's like the Joe Mixon thing too. If the Bengals were dominating games, if the Bengals were in the playoffs and sitting atop the division, I don't think we're referencing Joe Mixon once throughout the season, maybe keeping an eye on, Joe Mixon had a good game, good for him. I think the Joe Mixon narrative started to pick up for the Bengals because they were losing from a statistical standpoint, one of the worst rushing teams in football. So it was just easy to look at his big games for the Texans and say, man, I guess the Bengals could have used that. I think it's like the Castellanos thing. When the Reds were losing, man, they could have used Castellanos. I think if the Reds are winning, I don't think the Jonathan India narrative really is popping up throughout the season as much. But if they're losing, man, they could have used that leadership. They could have used Jonathan India's leadership in that clubhouse. I think that could be a narrative that floats if things don't get off to a good start.
If Matt McLean gets hurt, the Jonathan India clips are going to multiply by 10,000.
Fair. Yep.
Yeah.
That would be bad news.
Yeah, it will. I mean, I just think it's
unless Gavin Lux is Jesus.
He could be. That's what I heard on Twitter. Is that he was close to it.
We haven't fully resigned ourselves to the chance that Gavin Lux is going to be number one on the next year's NBA
Listen,
Top 100.
he could be. He could be. I'm not going to rule it out. I'm positive, Elliot, this year. I'm positive. Regarding the Jonathan India thing, no, I think people want their clicks. They want their headlines. There's not a more fun headline to read than a former player bashing former team for being cheap. And today's Major League Baseball, who, by the way, is actively trying to fix all these problems with the money situation and teams being too cheap and not caring at all. So, that's the world we live in Major League Baseball today. And to have another team come out or another player come out and bash a former team about it, that's what people want. That's what people want to read. When Kyle Farmer or Sonny Gray, I forget which one of them, came out and said it when they left Cincinnati, it was like nobody wants to leave. Nobody wants to leave the Reds. It's just that's how they do business there, and everybody's aware of it.
Yeah, obviously, so he was asked about this, as players are starting to ride for camp. When I reread it, I don't know. I guess it's all in how you want to perceive it and twist it, but he was complimenting the Reds and the hiring of Terry Francona. He says the Tito hiring is huge for them. They needed that. They need that discipline. They need that fire in their ass, is his exact quote. Again, I don't think he was – again, you can maybe technically see how that might have been a shot at David Bell, but overall very complimentary too. It wasn't sour grapes. It didn't seem like there was any hint of animosity towards the Reds for moving on from him. And to be fair, his name was on the – I felt like there was rumors of him being traded for 2 years. I don't think it was a surprise when they finally pulled the trigger on him, to be honest.
No, it wasn't a surprise at all. Not at all.
Not like a Luka thing. Not that he's Luka. I'm just saying, Luka was a surprise trade. Jonathan
Some
India
people
was
in
not
the
a
city
surprise
act
trade.
like Jonathan India was Luka.
Name them?
Do I have to?
Yeah.
You.
It's fair.
No, they know who they are.
They know who they are.
They know who they are. You know.
The genesis of Elliot and I's working relationship
But
is about a 45-minute Jonathan India debate.
That's true. And by the way, I think we're both wrong on it.
I do. I agree.
We're both completely wrong.
You're both very wrong. Yeah.
But yeah, listen, if Terry Francona is going to come back to Cincinnati or come to Cincinnati and change the way the culture of the clubhouse in a different way than David Bell did, and it works, great. I'm going to be very, very happy about it.
Reed brings up a good point in the chat that I guess we should ask the question: why is the Reds beat reporter interviewing Royals players?
He's got nothing else to do. There's certainly no Reds he could probably interview.
Yeah, it just seems like a good question.
He said sarcastically.
Yeah.
Well, hold on. If Jay Morrison interviewed Joe Mixon, which that would be a trick because Joe Mixon isn't like Jay Morrison. But, I mean, would we be mad at a Bengals reporter for interviewing Joe Mixon? There's a storyline there. But we don't trust the reporter. That's the thing. We know he was trying to get something. We trust Jay. The other guy, I don't think he was trying to get a positive quote from India.
Yeah, I think you're searching out negative Reds press from anyone on any team that'll give it to you. Probably works better on the Cubs pod.
As you mentioned, Justin, I mean, Jonathan India was on the trade block for seemingly his entire career in Cincinnati. I'd imagine his fondness with the Cincinnati Reds is a little bit different than, per se, a different former player. I think that's where the line gets a little bit blurred. We're going to go interview a guy who might actually have a significant grudge with the Reds.
And I don't think he got the quote he wanted, to be honest.
No, I don't think so either.
That. Jonathan India, a leader for the Reds in and out of the Reds clubhouse. How about that?
I mean, we did say trading him, we're going to lose the leadership factor. What if we didn't? What if he just keeps doing these interviews talking about how great our young core is and Tito's the best manager and he's still just the clubhouse leader?
Does he get a ring if the Reds win a World Series because of how nice he was to our young core?
If the Reds win a World Series this year, him and Votto both get rings.
Okay, that's fair.
And Devin Mesoraco for getting us the second pick last year.
Devin Mesoraco. And Luis Castillo.
Of course. Love Luis Castillo.
Castillo gets one. Johnny Cueto gets another one.
Castillo actually gets Noelvi Martes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
We just undo it. Whoop. Undo.
Yep. Jay Bruce will get one
for sure.
Actually, Jay Bruce won a. He won a
division.
Did he win a pennant with Cleveland, Justin? I think Jay Bruce won a pennant in Cleveland. I could be wrong. I'll have to go double check.
That I do not remember. My bad. Hey, question real quick: the Noelvi Marte thing. Did we overblow that the other day that he has not reported to spring training yet when he doesn't have to be there? Do you think that, for instance, if you don't think That's fair. No, I'm not disagreeing with you. I just realized when we did that, I was like, well, technically they don't have to report, but it is telling because they said you can count on your hand the amount of players that I think Jim Day came out. Someone came out with, I think it was Jim Day that came out with this quote that said you can count on your hand the amount of players that did not show up early for camp. And obviously he's one of those. Obviously not a great look. It's, it's kind of like, the voluntary workouts in the offseason for the NFL. Like it's voluntary. You don't have to go, but it's noticeable when you're absent. And that's kind of what this is with Noel.
I also think I'd care less if more people weren't there.
Yeah.
I mean, if you asked me to count on my hand the amount of people that should be there early, the first name I'd say is Noel Marte. So the fact that he's in the last group and not the first group, I don't know. Obviously, it's not a problem. He doesn't have to be there. If he had to be there and he wasn't there, it'd be a much bigger story. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm sure he'll be there when he's supposed to be there. And if he's not, we'll blow it up then and talk about it more then. But just not what I'd like, not what I wanted to see to start this season with a guy with probably the biggest question mark of this year. I mean, obviously there's guys, Reed did his top 5 most important players yesterday. There's a lot of guys that are more important than him to the success of this team immediately. But what he does or doesn't turn into for the long term is pretty crucial for where this Reds team can go with this core, talking about, longevity here. And I think this year's pretty formative for it. So, it's a shame that he's not, getting as much practice as possible, using the resources to the most of his ability. Because, if he would have went down to the Dominican League this winter and mashed, it's also a different story. But he continued to struggle and clearly needs, something to change. So we'll see what happens in spring training. We'll see what happens as we near this year. But certainly not the start that I was wanting for Noel Marte.
No, not at all. And also, real quick, other Reds news. Reds have announced that they renew all TV announcers except for Annie Sabo. So John Sadak, Chris Welsh, Barry Larkin, Jim Day, Jeff Brantley, Brian Giesenschlag, hopefully I said that right. Sam LeCure, our good friend Sam LeCure, all back for games with FanDuel, whatever it's called, FanDuel Cincinnati, whatever it is. I don't understand. FanDuel Ohio, Bally Sports Ohio, Fox Sports Ohio, FanDuel Cincinnati. All of our broadcasters will be back except for Annie Sabo.
And with that, too, I will say I did talk to Sam LeCure. He will be on with us on Tuesday.
Hell yes.
But I know that I have been known to say a guest will come on, and then that guest ends up not being able to come on. So
Molinaro.
Where's Molinaro?
Well, that one, no, first of all, there seemed to be no interest in that. And then he doesn't come on, and everyone lost their mind. And I'm like, that didn't seem to move anybody. So I didn't put a lot of urgency behind it. You know what? I'll show you. Yeah, I'll get Molinaro next week. I'm going to work on that.
And you just did it again.
I'm like a politician, dude. Well, not all. Some politicians keep their promises. Not all of them, but guess which one I would be. So there you go. But all right, let's step away for a few. We'll go through. How about this? John Rocker against Patrick Mahomes Sr.
Oh, yeah.
What the hell's happening here? What is happening? We'll be right back. More off the bench when we come back. Dave Portnoy announced a couple days ago that Rough and Rowdy, the main event, will feature Patrick Mahomes Sr. going up against John Rocker. Someone's off their rocker. What the hell's going on here? Kind of wild.
Not if Pat Jr. has anything to say about it. He lost his Super Bowl, lost his chance at a three-peat, and he's trying to get that fight canceled.
I certainly – poor Patrick Mahomes, man. It's just so much noise regarding – I mean, it's so much noise regarding his family, and it's like all his family had to do was just like be somewhat normal, and like I think he would be regarded as a different player. I don't hate Patrick Mahomes ever. I'll never hate him. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he's one of the best quarterbacks to ever play. Not in the Brady conversation anymore, but he's still one of the best quarterbacks to ever play. And I think the fact that he has to constantly worry about this stuff is so brutal. Also, there's no chance that fight happens. No chance. No chance that fight happens.
Considering all the mess that exists in that family, the fact that the worst flaws about him are that, the Kermit the Frog sounding voice along with the friendly flag from time to time, those are his worst character flaws. I think that's pretty good considering what seems to be running in that family where it's just a mess over there. So the guy's a good dude, all things considered. But, yeah, him having to battle that. I hope that fight doesn't happen for Patrick Mahomes' sake because that doesn't need to happen. I don't understand.
Well, for both Patrick Mahomes' sakes. I mean, Junior, this has to be pretty embarrassing. Senior, John Rocker would wipe the floor with Pat Senior.
We'll see. I guess we'll see.
I bet we won't.
Again, yeah. I mean, there's no way it happens. There's no way it happens. There's absolutely no way. Outside of that, though, things that happened yesterday, not a ton. Gonzaga win at home against San Francisco, 88-87 or 88-77. Oregon State lost to 9-17. Portland on the road, 84-72. 14th ranked Memphis and 25th ranked Maryland both got dubs yesterday in college basketball. NBA, the Mavericks stay hot. How about this? They get another win, 118-113 over the Heat. No Kyrie, no Luka, no AD, no problem.
Wow.
30-year-old Dante Exum led the charge, 27 points. So good for the Mavericks. I hope they do win. That would be very, very, very funny.
Like it all?
Huh?
Like
yeah,
all?
it would be very funny if they won it all.
That would be pretty funny.
It would be very good.
Is that what you're rooting for now?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
Them or the Lakers. I'm literally rooting for one of them. The Rockets, they lost to the Warriors 105-98. Jimmy Butler, 8 boards, 19 points with his new squad. NHL news. I guess it's not really NHL. It's just
It
USA.
is NHL.
Is it?
It's their All-Star game.
Okay, then it's NHL. Team USA blew the doors off Team Finland yesterday, 6-1, scoring 6 unanswered. Finland scored first. Okay, Jacob, you're going to have to help me. The Kachuk brothers?
Yeah.
Kachuk?
Chuck?
Kachuk?
To Chuck? Yeah.
Kachuk to
You
Chuck?
just got to say it fast. You don't got to worry about it.
Whatever that is,
Yeah.
they're brothers, and they scored 2 goals apiece.
The Chuck Hughes line is really, really good.
That's good. That's very good. So Team USA, they advance, or is this a round robin?
Yes, they advanced
Okay.
Canada on Saturday night.
Okay.
Canada Saturday night at 8, and then the championship, I believe, is either Sunday or Monday, but I think it bleeds into next week. Championship's in Boston.
Okay.
U.S. played in Montreal for their first round matchup, and all the Canadians booed the living hell out of the national anthem.
I saw that was a story.
Yeah, we
this
won
year.
by
Soon to be their national anthem.
That's right. Hope you liked it.
Just
Utter nonsense.
Other news from last night, Bengals' new defensive coordinator, Al Golden, was named the Broyles Award winner for the top assistant coach in college football.
Okay.
So not just the top defensive coach, but the top assistant coach in all of college football. Al Golden, great year at Notre Dame. Obviously playing cover 0 against the best wide receiver in college football wasn't enough to knock him down that list.
Yeah.
Hopefully he got that out of his system before he gets to Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Other news coming up this weekend. I've been wearing Alabama stuff all week because it's maybe the biggest regular season basketball game ever. Is that crazy to say?
It's
paper?
certainly on paper one of the best games. How many times has this happened before?
So this will be the 6th AP number 1 versus 2 matchup. It'll be 6th AP matchup between 1 versus number 2, and allegedly the first 1 versus 1 between Alabama number 1 in the coaches poll, Auburn number 1 in the AP poll. First time a top 5 matchup of the Iron Bowl in SEC history. It's it's going to be a crazy game. It's in Coleman Coliseum. I was looking up how to get down there. I was going to try to go to the game, get in price about $400. So I will not be going to Tuscaloosa for that one, but it should be great. Tune in Friday at 4 or Saturday at 4. Interesting that ESPN, obviously, as they always do, has the marquee college basketball game, and they don't know how long games are. Yeah. So Alabama tips off at 4, number 1 versus number 2, but Arizona plays at 2. So unless that Arizona game is 2 hours or less, you'll be watching the first 8 to 10 minutes of number 1 versus number 2 over on ESPN News. So that's going to stink for whatever bartender at the bar I'm watching it at, having to go back and forth in the middle of the first half, but first quarter of the game.
Yeah.
By the way, speaking of college basketball, a lot of people sort of freaking out who have YouTube TV because, well, apparently there was a chance, YouTube TV users could be at risk of missing March Madness games due to a carriage dispute with Paramount. But don't worry, because by the way, it always happens around this time when the Super Bowl is about to come, NFL playoffs about to start, or any major sporting event. There's always some kind of fear thing that comes out of, oh my gosh, your cable provider, you need to send a letter to, call your cable provider and let them know you're upset. They always spark fear in everybody, and then all of a sudden it gets done at the last second because it just came out about an hour ago. YouTube TV and Paramount have reached a last-minute short-term agreement to temporarily settle the carriage dispute. CBS is set to air March Madness games and the Masters in the coming months. So no fear. It all got resolved, but don't worry. By the way, the problem with that, too, YouTube TV announced that they were going to start charging $10 more a month, and then they let everybody know that, you might not be able to watch March Madness, but don't worry. They got it resolved, and now that justifies the $10 more a month. So there you go.
Well, I've seen a lot of people saying that, and that's what YouTube TV is saying too. Well, we got it resolved. There's your $10 extra a month. But you had that anyway at the old price. You're not getting anything new. They just threatened to take it from you and then said, you can have it back for more money.
Yeah.
It's crazy, man. I wish there was a way where you could just, buy a box, connect the cable to your TV, and it just had all the channels in there, ready to go, all the sports you want to watch. That'd just make life so much easier.
So
you're still
Chiefs.
Your house does cable. Okay.
Yeah, I'm still a cable guy.
We still have cable as well. Kenner, you still have cable or no?
I am a YouTube TV guy.
All right.
The only time I wish I had YouTube TV is March Madness, because the quad screen is phenomenal. Going to miss that from college. But NFL Sunday Ticket does it on their own app, so you can get the YouTube TV functionalities and stuff for that. So I've avoided the necessity. But, it certainly is nice.
Yeah, I've always liked it just because you could take it anywhere on your phone or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's basically most of them, like Hulu TV and others. But we're live on YouTube, so
now.
YouTube TV. Yeah.
I guess we're
live on
true.
YouTube.
Yeah, we should pump YouTube TV.
That's right. YouTube TV.
The Kansas City Chiefs have reportedly given tight end Travis Kelce until March 14th to figure out what his plans are for the future. What do you guys think the future for Travis Kelce is? Is he the tight end for the Chiefs next year? And if he is, do they still need to be thinking about who their next tight end is going to be, or does that guy exist on their roster already?
He's 35 years old. He's coming off a season where I think we'd all agree that that wasn't the Travis Kelce we've seen in years past.
Right.
Only 3 touchdowns this year, only 5 the year before that. I would say that the Travis Kelce experience is coming to an end. I don't know if he will end it in Kansas City. If I were a betting man, I'd say he'd go out to one more team and end there. But yeah, I would say Travis Kelce, it seems silly to me to not play at least one more because of how that ended. So I'm going to say he plays next year. I just don't know if it's with the Chiefs.
I think the only reason he would play next year is because he can't sit at home and watch Pat win another Super Bowl. I think that's why he wouldn't play next year. Or would play next year. So I don't think he's coming back to play if it's not for the Chiefs. I just don't think that's the case. I think he would ride this out as long as he thinks he physically can with Mahomes and Reed, because, the facts say it, you're going to be playing in the AFC Championship or the Super Bowl every year. So you're giving yourself a 1 or 2 game stretch there to try to win another championship. And I think his ideal scenario is they go out on top. And I think if they would have won this year, he would have retired on the podium or very soon after. And I don't know how much this will swing that, because obviously at some point, as he said on his podcast, that at some point it just feels a little bit more like work, and it starts to weigh on your body a little bit more when you get older, and that's obviously when you have to give it up, because football is a sport where if you don't love it every single day, you're going to get hurt. So you absolutely do have to hang it up. I think we'll see his role in that offense go back even from what we saw this year, and then really try to unleash him in the playoffs. But I don't think he's going anywhere. I don't even think he's going anywhere after next year unless they're champions, which I don't expect them to be. I think they have a little bit of ways to go to get this roster back to where it is. Even now with the pieces they're potentially losing in free agency. So I don't think he's going anywhere. I think he has about a year or 2 left to try to get one more and go out on top, or at least end with like a 1,000-yard season. I even think the conversation is different if they lose the Super Bowl and he had a Travis Kelce year this year. I just have a hard time seeing him go out not on top with how his career, especially in the last couple of years, has gone.
The thing that's been very lucky for the Chiefs over the years, look, we're in Cincinnati, Jamar Chase about to get his 40, and how do you have a receiver making 40 and then you get T done for 30? The biggest thing that has gone in the favor of the Chiefs is obviously Travis Kelce being their number one pass catcher, but the tight end position, when you have an elite tight end that is your most elite pass catcher, you're getting the production of a Jamar Chase for more than half the price, right? Like in two different positions, but the Chiefs' primary, pass catcher outside of the Tyreek Hill years has been a tight end that makes about 15, 17 mil a year. In the Bengals, their number one pass catcher is going to be a guy making 40. If you can get an elite tight end, that just it makes it so much more comfortable from a roster makeup standpoint, from a dollar standpoint. Obviously, we're about to see the Chiefs have to probably venture off into something different. I think getting Rashee Rice back is gonna. I think we saw Worthy have a big game in the Super Bowl from a statistical standpoint. I know a lot of that came late, the 50-yard bomb, all that, but I think Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice is going to be a nice 1-2 punch, as far as that goes. But I'm curious if they change up their offense. It's been so built around obviously Travis Kelce in the tight end position. I'm curious, Andy Reid is the offensive guru. How much do you think they change their offensive approach moving forward? Because you can't continue to have it be tight end centric, even with Travis Kelce moving forward. I do think they have to make a couple new wrinkles to this, because I think they need to open it up a little bit more. You look at what the Bills do, you look at what the Bengals do, and others. I know everyone was trying to copy the Chiefs route for a moment. I think the Chiefs are going to have to adapt and go back to getting elite pass catchers in the wide receiver range, which is going to be a lot more costly than what they've had to deal with in recent years.
Yeah, that's why they lost the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
The Chiefs lost the Super Bowl because they didn't have enough pass catchers. And you can talk about anything else, but if your receivers get open quicker and your quarterback's not running around in the pocket for his life, then the protection doesn't look as bad. So I think that's a huge, huge reason as to why the Chiefs struggled to win that Super Bowl or to compete in that Super Bowl, is because they didn't have consistent weapons. Even when they were still in the game, at least to a degree, DeAndre Hopkins drops a wide open ball down the sideline. That could have changed the whole feel of the game. So I think, Sunday night, the Super Bowl really changed how we are going to talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. And I don't mean that from a dynasty perspective. We've exhausted that topic more than we probably even should have. But everyone pointed to, especially here in Cincinnati, how they moved Tyreek Hill and they've competed since. Well, this offseason, we're talking about them going to trade for Tyreek Hill back, because we think that's their best chance to try to compete for a Super Bowl next year. So I think in terms of just seeing it for a lot of these guys, that it's not just always a Super Bowl for Patrick Mahomes, seeing him really get beat like that means a lot. And then seeing that you need weapons, and there's different ways to win. And the Eagles paid 2 guys and won, paid a running back, which everyone said you shouldn't do, and won, paid 2 offensive linemen $20 million, which everyone said you shouldn't do, and won. They hit in the draft. They've sold the minority ownership. They've done everything a modern franchise does, and they've been able to win. The Chiefs have had this work because they found a top 10 receiver maybe of all time in the 3rd round at a position that's a third of the price. I do think the Chiefs are going to try to attack this last year or two of Travis Kelce's window by getting his replacement. I expect them to draft a tight end, maybe even sign a young guy in this class and see if Travis Kelce can, jumpstart that projection into being I'm not saying he's going to be Travis Kelce, but to being a Travis Kelce-esque player, that joker tight end that can't really block, but is a hell of a receiver and can save the Chiefs a lot of money. My absolute nightmare is Harold Fannin from Bowling Green ending up in Kansas City, sitting behind Travis Kelce for a couple of years. We've talked about how he can't block. He really struggles in line, but Travis Kelce does too. He had the best single-season receiving year for a tight end in NCAA football history. If Travis Kelce can aid him along at the start of his NFL career, that would be a nightmare for everyone, hoping that the Chiefs finally have to pony up for top weapons. But we'll see where they go. I think they're going to try to keep tight end as a focal point. It's just you have to get lucky with another Travis Kelce, which we haven't seen many of in our lives.
There's a move that's unlikely, but I do think it would catapult them right back to the top, and it's not a tight end. Look, I think you get Rashee Rice back with Xavier Worthy. I think you're fine from pass catchers right there. Is it the best in football? No, but I mean, if you're Patrick Mahomes, you got to find a way to make it work. There's drama brewing in Buffalo right now with Cooks. So I think right now, if the Chiefs can get a dynamic running back like that, which, by the way, where are we with that? Is he worth $15 million a year? I don't believe so.
I think so.
You think he is? Mm-hmm. Well, if the Chiefs agree with that, I do everything I can to get a dynamic running back like that. You saw what Christian McCaffrey did to the Niners. You look what Saquon just did for the Eagles. If the Chiefs all of a sudden, with that defense and the primary pass catchers they already have, if you get a dynamic running back like that, look out. By the way, what's the chances that the Chiefs, who are picking at the back of the draft, what if they end up taking the running back out of Boise State? What if they get a dynamic running back like that? That could be the closes the gap on the lack of
Boy, that
production
would-
from the tight end in the time being. I would look out for the Chiefs to go running back in the draft or go after James Cooks if possible.
Boy, that would hurt. If they got G&T, I mean, that would stink. I don't think he'd fall that much.
I would be pretty shocked if he was there at 31, but obviously they could move up. They've done it
that
before.
would. I think he did. I think they drafted CEH.
They did, at 31.
At the 31 before, and he was really good. Up and obviously it didn't end well in Kansas City, but he was very, very good with the Chiefs.
Extenuating circumstances there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, I definitely think they could attack it in a less traditional sense to try to overhaul this offense because, I mean, I think the main takeaway from the Super Bowl is they're going to have to pour a lot of money and assets into the offensive line. I mean, Trey Smith is a free agent. You extended Creed Humphrey last year, but you got to pay some people. These tackles you drafted haven't worked. Kingsley Suamataia was terrible last year. DJ Humphries, you brought in off the street, was terrible last year. You have to overhaul that offensive line as well as add weapons, as well as extend people on defense, as well as not go into next year with Samaje Perine and Isaiah Pacheco as your backfield, as well as bank on a guy with a mangled knee and a questionable offseason pass to be your number one wide receiver next year. I don't know how great of a spot they're in, but they have Andy Reid, they have Patrick Mahomes, they have Steve Spagnuolo, so they're going to be a top 2 or 3 seed in the AFC next year in the playoffs, and we'll be scratching our heads saying how'd they get here, and then hopefully it's a different story in the playoffs, or the same story, the Bengals are just in the playoffs this time.
Yeah.
All right, well, from appreciate you guys tuning in and hanging out with us here on a Friday. Until next week, this has been Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers.
Box lunch coming up.
Are we actually back? I'm not even sure what.
We are back.
Once you hear the music, we're back.
There are fans standing on top of the Citizens Bank Field sign, throwing beers to the parade floats in Philly.
I can't wait till we have a parade here.
I
Cannot
texted
wait.
my mom this morning. One of my roommates in college lives in Philly. He got down to the parade this morning at 7:30. I woke up to just pictures of him at the parade.
Yep.
And it looks like just a wonderful time. And I just texted my mom, and one day. That's all I said. Just one day.
One day we'll just keep the dream alive. God, that feeling's going to feel so good.
I say it a lot, and I do genuinely think I mean it. Winning the Super Bowl would be the second best day of that year for me.
Okay.
The parade's number one.
The parade would be number one.
The parade would be number one.
Getting there, too, is a phenomenal feeling. I'll never forget the feeling we had
Yeah.
when we got there. But we have a super chat, Justin. This is from the Amazing Fetus.
Oh, thank you.
1 month. He's been a member.
What a name.
I don't understand what this was in reference to, but he just says, also faking injuries for clout.
I think that was back when the Patrick Mahomes thing. I think it was probably when I said his worst traits were his Kermit the Frog voice and getting a friendly flag from the official.
Do we think that was a shot by Nike? The Eagles Super Bowl commercial narrated by Kermit the Frog.
Maybe a little bit. It could be. It could be.
Mahomes is an Adidas guy. That seemed a little poignant, if you ask me.
That's right. Justin,
and I didn't think that Kermit was relevant enough to be able to put him in a Nike commercial. It had to be a shot, right?
That seemed pretty clear. Maybe I'm grasping for straws, but as soon as I saw that, I was like, well, that's something.
Who in the boardroom is like, hey, I have an idea. We need Kermit the Frog to help elevate our Nike brand right now. I think that was a shot. But Elliot, what you got?
Big game tonight, Justin. You guys gonna win or no?
I feel like they're going to beat Milwaukee. I'm worried about the one Sunday. Now, they should blow out Green Bay on Sunday, but you never want to be the team that gives Green Bay their first damn win in conference play. That's what
was it, Kyle
worried
Kuzma?
about. Yeah,
you don't want to be that team?
That's right. Don't want to be that team.
Yeah. Because the longer it goes, it's just like, They have Northern Kentucky tonight. I know you guys had Brewing on.
NKU is doing a solid if they lose this game today, because
that's true.
It would take all the pressure off, and that would be an easy win. But if they win it, then all the pressure's back onto Wright State. Who's Wright State's best player this year?
Kenner's
Kinner's the best player.
Brandon Knoll. Brandon Knoll is there. He won the conference preseason player of the year, but he's averaged like 20 and 10 over his last like 6 games. But that kid, like, he's like an old school post player, but he's fun as hell to watch. This team, they're like 12 and 12. Not a great record, but like they're way better than their record says. Like, it's what drives me nuts. Like, it's really hard to prop them up with the 12 and 12 record, but they honestly are really good. They've lost, I think, more than almost half their games in the final minutes. Like, they've had a couple shots or a couple games they've lost at the buzzer, a couple games they've lost, from the team just knocking down some free throws to ice it out. It's a very good team. It's just their first year head coach, Clint Sargent's awesome. I love Clint. But yeah, they got some good players, but just hasn't had a lot of things go their way this year. NKU is usually really good too.
Where do you think the Horizon ranks amongst all the leagues that aren't power conferences? I feel like the Horizon League's up there. I don't think the Horizon League's a bad conference.
It's been better as of late because they have good coaches, like Greg Campy with Oakland last year. I actually think the small conference like the Horizon has benefited from the fact that there's an influx of guards in college basketball. So if you go watch any Horizon League game, there's always really, really good guards because all the good post players are being – they're getting the NIL money. More of the NIL money is going to big, tall, longer, lengthier players. So there's an influx of guards that are kind of sitting there waiting for opportunities, and I think the Horizon League has been uplifted by that. I think the Horizon League's pretty solid this year. I think there's only 3 teams that no one gives a shot at winning anything. I think teams 1 through 8 can win the tournament coming up. So we'll see. We will see. Cleveland State's good. That team won like 14 straight. I look out for Cleveland State. I do think Wright State's good enough to win the tournament. They won't be the favorites by any means. But Fort Wayne's really good too. But yeah, I know it's a conference that doesn't get a lot of attention, and I get that. Not a lot of small conferences do.
Casey, do you want to put the link back in? Do you want to try that one more time and for the final 7 minutes here?
Yeah, I can, I guess.
Put it in there, and we'll open it up for Michael Rolfe if he wants to call in. This is a Michael Rolfe hotline, so if you have Michael Rolfe, we'll keep it open for a little bit, and that's what we're waiting for. So I will wait, because Michael Rolfe is a legend of the chat. In fact, Michael Rolfe, if there was a person, maybe Drew Garrison's in this camp too, for people who have donated the most money to Chatterbox, Michael Rolfe has to be number 1. Has to be number 1. I don't even know who the second option. Yeah. I don't know who the third option would be. Second option would probably be Garrison, maybe Fetters. Or Justin Edgell. Justin Edgell's given a lot, too.
Fetters is a longevity stat, though.
Yeah, it is. So if Rolfe's here, we'll give him like a couple minutes. We'll stall. Because Kinner's got to go at 12.
While we're stalling, real quick, by the way, you know how every college football season they come out with like the best names in college football? There's a new one to add to the list.
Number 1 wide receiver in 2027? Yep.
Oh,
he's awesome. Yep. He's my favorite player ever. If Heartline doesn't get him to Columbus, I'm going to be pissed.
Yep.
You know his name?
Last name Feaster. What's his first name, Jake?
Booby. We're talking about Booby Feaster. The number 1 player in the class of 2027, Booby Feaster.
I love that name. Come
on, Heartline. I'm Team Booby, baby.
Get it done.
Team Booby.
I'll find a way to get the old Jack Youngblood Rams jersey, too, where it has both names on the back.
Yeah.
An Ohio State jersey that says Booby Feaster on the back would be pretty tough.
I like that.
That'd be good stuff.
You can't just have Feaster on the back.
They wouldn't understand. You wouldn't understand. Yeah. It's got to be Booby Feaster.
So. What are the odds the Bengals take a tight end with that first pick?
Non-zero.
Non-zero is how you'd say it. All right.
I would say it's the same exact odds that Tyler Warren is there at 17.
Okay.
But if he is.
I don't think it's high. I think he's going to be a top 10 pick. But, if he is there, I think the Bengals could definitely go that route. And I would be very happy. I think that would be very exciting.
Okay. All right. I like that. There it is. There's the link right there. So if Rolfe is here, you got about 4 minutes here to call in. 4 minutes. We shall wait.
No, we can't just do that.
What, the whole song?
While we are waiting, the last hour of our drive yesterday was dialed in, and that was the most captivating. I couldn't turn it away. I was just fascinated by it. I mean, I could feel Casey boiling. Jacob, I could hear the anger in your typing. When you were you're messaging in, and I'm like, oh, Tom, I've been here before. Like, I felt bad. It was just brutal watching you guys. It was like a pack of hyenas, man. Like, there was nothing left except the skeletal remains of Tom Brenneman yesterday after you guys just pounced on the guy.
I sat here in this chair, and I watched Jacob's reaction. I watched Jacob's reaction to the whole thing. And it's a shame that Jacob wasn't on the show yesterday, because I feel like they would have gotten to an argument that somebody would have left crying. And it would have been similar to the day you threw this helmet at us. Like, I would have been close. Now the difference was I was completely Zoom, so I don't know how that would have worked. But man, it would have been bad in here. I would have had to leave the room. I probably would have had to leave the room. In fact, I definitely would have had to leave the room.
It was all fun.
Yeah, it's all fun. We're just having fun. You don't gotta get upset when you're talking sports, especially in this.
Never.
I don't have that in my bag.
What, to get upset?
The not getting upset.
Oh, not getting
when
upset.
talking sports.
See, I can get upset about it for like a little bit, and then I like if it escalates to the point of we're all just screaming at each other, it's like, all right, we'll just tone it back down, because I don't care that much.
That's usually what my friends and I do when we hang out together.
Yeah,
just sit in the living room and yell at each other.
Correct. I have a good friend, and I've said his name many times in the show, but he's a yeller. And once like my biggest bit to him is Gonzaga sucks, and I know Gonzaga doesn't, but my argument will always be that Gonzaga can't compete.
Well, they've never been to a Final Four.
That's what I'm saying. So I always say to him, who's the Loyola Chicago has double the championships or triple the championships of Gonzaga. And he's and he gets into a big yelling match, and he yells at me. I'm like, it's true. I'm sorry. You don't like to agree with me, but that's the fact. Just because they won it in 1952 doesn't matter. They have more championships. It's looking like he's not on, so it's looking like we're not going to have him.
No luck. Mark Few also has more large dogs than championships.
Wow. How about that? Poor Mark Few.
No.
Poor Mark Few.
Definitely not.
Where do you think Mark Few ranks on the pantheon of college basketball coaches?
He's one of those guys that's really fun to talk about, because it's like if he wins a championship at any point, it's like he's a top 3 coach. Yeah. But like he doesn't have one
until he does it.
What did I bring up to you last year? The most uncomfortable conversation we're going to have at some point is when Rudy Gobert forces himself onto a championship team.
Yep.
3 defensive player of the years, all these all-stars. If he somehow gets a ring, we have some weird conconversations we got to have. I think there's a lot of guys like that in sports.
Traded for four first rounders.
4 ones, yeah. Triple what Luka got.
That's so
quadruple.
I've had a weird day of bad takes. Actually, not a weird day. It's just another day. But I think college basketball, national championships mean everything. Don't get me wrong. But I think of all sports, a national championship in basketball means less than any other championship in any sport. Like, I think we prop up a lot of coaches who don't win championships and still say how great they are. Like, I don't feel like you have to win a national championship in basketball to be viewed as one of the best coaches in basketball. Like, I feel like in football, you have to win a national championship. Like, when we talk about the top coaches in college football, we say, well, it's a good coach, but they haven't won a national championship. I mean, it's so cutthroat in college football. We look at Dabo Swinney and say, yeah, I don't think he's one of the top coaches in college football just because of how bad Clemson's been over the last handful of years, ever since they've kind of taken a step back. But Mark Few is one of the best coaches in all of college basketball. But he may never win a national championship, and that doesn't impact him whatsoever. It's like getting to the tournament, making runs in tournaments, putting guys in the NBA. Like, that's how you're classified as a good coach in college basketball. That stuff don't fly in football. You got to do all that and win national championships. It is kind of strange in that regard.
That Jalen Suggs buzzer beater was awesome, though.
Yes, it was.
Very cool.
Yes, it was. All right, we don't have him, so that's it. That's our show today. Boxed lunch coming up in a few minutes. Give us a couple minutes. We got to cut out the radio and give it to the radio. So Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett, Casey McAllister.
Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett, Justin Kinner, and Casey McAllister.
Did I say it wrong?
No.
What'd you say?
Oh, he was just helping. Do you want to do it too? Say our name.
I thought this was like a Burrow Votto thing from earlier where I couldn't get it right.
Right.
That was like
no. We both
say our names. Say all of our names, Justin.
That wraps it up for us here off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett, and Casey McAllister. Happy Friday.